please help me, please.
Move out of the road, you old woman.
I'm begging you, please help me.
Because you refuse to help, I curse you this day. Your empire will crumble.
A billionaire's cruelty. The stranger's curse. When everything crumbles, he'll discover that love can't be bought, only earned through sacrifice. This is the story of Theodore Ashford. The rain fell like divine judgment over Geneva. Theodore Ashford III pressed his phone harder against his ear, rainwater streaming down the window of his Rolls-Royce Phantom as his driver navigated the slick cobblestones of the old town. Outside, the city's medieval architecture blurred into watercolor grays and blacks. "I don't care if the Swiss regulators are concerned," Theodore said, his voice cold as polished marble. "Tell them Ashford Holdings doesn't negotiate. We dictate terms." He was 42 years old and had built an empire that spanned 3 continents: banking, real estate, technology ventures that made grown men weep with envy. His face had graced the covers of Financial Times and Forbes, always the same expression: controlled, calculated, untouchable. Love was a weakness. Sentiments was a liability. These were the lessons his mother had carved into him like commandments on stone tablets. The car lurched to a stop. "What's happening?" Theodore snapped, lowering his phone. "There's someone in the road, sir," his driver, Philippe, said quietly. Theodore leaned forward. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could see her, an old woman, hunched beneath a torn umbrella, standing directly in their path. Her clothes were soaked through, hanging off her frame like burial shrouds. "Go around her." "Sir, she's looking right at us." And she was. Even through the downpour, Theodore could see her eyes, dark and depthless, fixed on his car with an intensity that made something ancient stir in his chest. Philippe honked. The woman didn't move. Theodore checked his Patek Philippe Grand's complication. The meeting with the regulatory board started in 12 minutes. Billions hung in the balance. He had charts, projections, a presentation designed to dismantle every objection before it could form. He had no time for this. "I'll handle it," Theodore said, stepping out into the rain. The cold hit him immediately, soaking through his Tom Ford suit, custom-tailored in Milan, $15,000 of charcoal wool now plastered to his shoulders. He strode toward the woman, irritation radiating from every movement. Move, now. Up close, she was even more ruined than he thought. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her hands gnarled and trembling. But her eyes? God, her eyes were sharp as broken glass. "Please," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "My grandson is sick. I need money for medicine. Just a little. Anything you can spare." Theodore felt nothing. He'd heard 1,000 versions of this story from 1,000 desperate people. Everyone wanted something from Theodore Ashford. Everyone had a crisis only his money could solve. "I don't carry cash," he said flatly. "Move out of the way." "Please!" She stepped closer, reaching for his sleeve. Her fingers were ice cold, even through the wet fabric. "I've been waiting here for hours. You're the first person who stopped." "My driver stopped. I didn't. And now you're making me late for something that actually matters. Whatever problems you have, they're not my concern." "Your meeting can wait," she said, and something in her tone changed, became harder, darker. A child's life cannot. "Then go to a hospital, go to charity, go anywhere but in front of my car." He turned away, done with this conversation, done with her presumption that his time belonged to anyone but himself. "I'm begging you." "Then beg someone who cares." The words came out like a whip crack, final, dismissive. Theodore took 3 steps back toward his car before her voice stopped him. "You'll understand," she said quietly. "Soon enough, you'll understand what it means to beg." He turned. She was smiling, not sadly, not bitterly, but with a certainty that crawled under his skin like insects. People like you, she continued, raising her voice above the drumming rain. You think you're untouchable. You think your money builds walls high enough to keep out consequence. But I see what you are, Theodore Ashford. I see the hollow where your heart should be. Threatening me? He laughed, cold and sharp. Do you have any idea who? You will lose everything, she said, and the rain seemed to pause, seemed to hold its breath. Your health, your fortune, your purpose, everything will slip through your fingers like water, and you won't understand why, not until you learn what you should have learned today. And what's that? That love freely given is the only thing that matters. Theodore stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, the smile he used to crush competitors, to dismiss fools, to remind the world of its place beneath him. Enjoy the rain, he said. He climbed back into his car, shut the door, and didn't look back as Philippe navigated around her. Within seconds, she disappeared into the gray curtain of the storm. Theodore made his meeting with 4 minutes to spare. His presentation was flawless. The regulators approved his expansion plans. He won. That night, the first headache started. 3 months later, Theodore's world had developed cracks. Small ones at first, imperceptible to anyone but him. The headaches came and went without pattern or mercy, ice picks behind his eyes that no doctor could explain. Specialists in Zurich, London, New York, neurologists, holistic healers, even an acupuncturist his assistant had insisted on, nothing helped. Your tests are perfect, Mr. Ashford, they all said. There's nothing physically wrong. But there was. Theodore could feel it in his bones, a wrongness that grew like frost creeping across a window. Worse than a pain was the emptiness. He'd always prided himself on his clarity of mind, his ability to read people and situations with ruthless precision. Now, sitting across from business partners, he felt nothing. Their words reached his ears but triggered no calculation, no strategy, no response. He sat in meetings like a passenger in his own life. Theodore, are you listening? He blinked. His board of directors stared at him across the mahogany table in his Geneva penthouse office. Rain fell outside. It was always raining now, or perhaps he only noticed it more. Of course, he said automatically. Then you agree to the merger terms. Did he? He couldn't remember what they'd been discussing. The words had washed over him like that cursed rain. Table it. I need more data. After they left, his chief financial officer lingered, Victor Laurent, 20 years at his side, the closest thing Theodore had to a friend, which meant they had dinner twice a year and never discussed anything personal. You've been off lately, Victor said carefully. People are starting to notice. People can notice whatever they want. Theodore, Victor hesitated, choosing his words like stepping through a minefield. The Tokyo deal fell through because you didn't return calls for 3 weeks. The London property acquisition, we lost it to a bidder offering 30 million less because you couldn't decide. And now there are rumors that you're losing your edge, that Ashford Holdings is vulnerable. That sentence felt like a physical blow, but the emotion was distant, muted, like watching himself be struck through fogged glass. Get out, he quietly said. Victor left. Theodore stood alone in his office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Geneva. His reflection stared back, still handsome, still commanding, still wrapped in wealth and power. The Hermès tie at his throat, the brigade cufflinks at his wrists, the Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But hollow. The word the old woman had used echoed in his mind. Hollow. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass and wondered, for the first time in his adult life, if he was dying. His mother called the next morning. Theodore, darling, I heard about Tokyo. It's handled, he lied. Is it? Because I also heard you're seeing doctors, multiple doctors. Of course she'd heard. His mother had informants everywhere, a network of social connections and carefully placed loyalties that would put intelligence agencies to shame. Routine checkups. Don't lie to me. I didn't raise a liar. I raised someone who wins, and right now, you're not winning. I'm fine, Mother. You're distracted, weak. I can hear it in your voice. Whatever's wrong, fix it. The Ashford name doesn't permit failure. She hung up. Theodore sat in silence, phone still pressed to his ear, and felt absolutely nothing at all. Elena Rossi arrived at his penthouse on a Thursday morning when the rain had finally paused. She stood in his foyer with a worn suitcase and clear green eyes that took in the marble floors, the Rothko on the wall, the baccarat chandelier that cost more than most people earned in a year, and seemed entirely unimpressed. "Mr. Ashford?" She extended her hand. "I'm your new cook. The agency sent my resume." He'd forgotten the agency was sending someone. His previous chef had quit 2 weeks ago, the 5th in 6 months. They all left with the same complaint. He was impossible to please, cold, dismissive, as if that was news. Theodore didn't shake her hand. "You're young." "I'm 28. I meant inexperienced. I've worked in kitchens since I was 16. I have references." "I don't care about references." He turned away, already bored. "Make dinner tonight. If it's acceptable, you can stay. The position is live-in. Your room is on the 3rd floor. Don't bother me unless the house is on fire." He walked away without waiting for a response. Behind him, Elena's voice. "It's nice to meet you too, Mr. Ashford." Was that sarcasm? Theodore paused, glanced back. But she was already following his housekeeper down the hall, her worn suitcase bumping against her leg. Something about her irritated him. Maybe the lack of fear. Maybe those eyes that looked at him without awe or hunger, just clear assessment, like he was a puzzle she didn't particularly care to solve. He pushed the thought away and returned to his study, where 3 days of unopened correspondence waited. That evening, Elena appeared in his dining room doorway. "Dinner is ready." Theodore didn't look up from his laptop. "Put it on the table." She did. When he finally glanced over, he saw a simple plate, roasted chicken, herbs he didn't recognize, vegetables glistening with olive oil, no garnish, no architectural pretension, just food. He cut into the chicken, took a bite. It was perfect. Tender, seasoned with something earthy and bright. The vegetables had been roasted until their edges caramelized, releasing a sweetness that balanced the savory herbs. It was the best thing he'd tasted in months. He swallowed. "It's adequate." Elena, who'd been waiting by the doorway, nodded once. "I'll adjust tomorrow." "Adjust what?" "You didn't finish the vegetables. Too sweet, probably. I'll use less honey in the glaze." Theodore stared at her. "I didn't say anything was wrong." "You didn't have to." She smiled, brief, professional. "Enjoy your meal, Mr. Ashford." She left. Theodore sat alone at his 16-seat dining table, the perfect dinner growing cold in front of him, and felt the strangest sensation, curiosity. Who was this girl? Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Theodore cooked 3 meals a day. She kept to herself, never intruding, never seeking conversation, but her presence settled into the penthouse like morning light, gentle, persistent, impossible to ignore. Theodore criticized everything. The soup was too salty, the fish was overcooked by 30 seconds, the bread wasn't warm enough. He delivered these verdicts flatly, watching for cracks in her composure. Elena never cracked. "I'll remember that," or "Good to know your preference." No defensiveness, no hurt, just adjustment. It drove him insane. One morning, he found her in the kitchen before dawn, kneading dough by hand. Her sleeves were rolled up, flour dusting her forearms, and she was humming something low and Italian. "Why are you doing that manually?" he asked from the doorway. "I have a mixer." She didn't startle. "It's better this way. You can feel when it's ready." "That's inefficient." "Maybe." She smiled at the dough, not him. "But it makes better bread." Theodore watched her work, the rhythm of her hands, the peace in her movements. When had anyone in his house looked peaceful? "Where are you from?" he asked, surprising himself. "A small town in Tuscany. You wouldn't know it." "Try me." "Montepulciano." He did know it, had attended a wedding there once, years ago, when he still accepted social invitations. He remembered winding streets and wine that tasted like sunshine. "Why leave?" Elena's hands paused, just for a moment. "My mother is sick. Treatment is expensive. This position pays well." "What's wrong with her?" "Does it matter?" The question wasn't rude, just honest. Did it matter to Theodore? Would her answer change anything? "No, I suppose it doesn't." Elena resumed kneading. "The agency said you needed someone for 3 months, through the end of the season. That's perfect for me. 3 months of pay is exactly what I need for her treatment. And then I go home." She shaped the dough into a smooth ball, placed it in a bowl, covered it with a cloth. "I'm engaged to someone who's waited very patiently for me to come back." Something cold moved through Theodore's chest. Not jealousy, he barely knew this woman, but something else. Disappointment, maybe, that she was already claimed, already planned out, already leaving. "He's a lucky man," Theodore said, and meant it. Elena looked at him then, really looked, and her expression softened. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." He left before she could see whatever was showing on his face. The collapse came on a Friday. Theodore woke to agony, not the familiar ice pick headaches, but something worse. His chest felt crushed, his lungs struggling against some invisible weight. When he tried to stand, his legs buckled. He fell. The bedroom floor was cold against his cheek. His phone was on the nightstand, 3 feet away, completely unreachable. "This is it," he thought with strange clarity. "This is how I die. Alone." Then he heard running footsteps. "Mr. Ashford?" Elena's voice sharp with alarm. She must have heard the fall. The door burst open, and she was there, kneeling beside him, her hands, those capable hands that kneaded bread and chopped vegetables, now checking his pulse, his breathing. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No," he managed. "No hospitals." "You need—" "No." He grabbed her wrist with what little strength remained. "Please." Their eyes met. Hers were wide, frightened. His must have looked desperate. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, but I'm calling a doctor, one I trust, and you're going to let me help you." He didn't have the strength to argue. Dr. Reeves arrived within an hour, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and no patience for Theodore's usual dismissiveness. She examined him thoroughly while Elena hovered in the doorway. "It's not a heart attack, but your body's shutting down. Stress, likely, combined with severe insomnia and malnutrition. When was the last time you ate properly?" Theodore almost laughed. He'd been eating Elena's perfect food for weeks. "I eat fine." "You pick at meals," Elena said quietly from the doorway. "I've watched you. You barely finish anything." Dr. Reeves looked between them. "You need rest, real rest, and you need someone to make sure you actually take care of yourself. Can you do that?" Theodore wanted to say yes, wanted to maintain the illusion of control, but the lie wouldn't come. "I'll make sure he does," Elena said. The days that followed blurred together. Elena moved him to a guest room on the 2nd floor. Easier for her to check on him, she said. She brought meals on trays and sat with him until he finished eating. Her presence somehow made the food bearable when everything else felt like ashes. She read to him when the headaches were too severe for screens, old novels from his library that he'd never opened. Her voice was soft, accented, soothing. She didn't treat him like Theodore Ashford III, titan of industry. She treated him like a person that hurt. One night, delirious with fever, he told her things he'd never told anyone, about his father who died when Theodore was 12, leaving him alone with a mother who measured love in achievements, about his first company built from desperation and spite, about the loneliness that had calcified around his heart, like armor. "You don't have to talk," Elena said, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "I can't stop," he whispered. "It's all coming out, all the things I locked away. Then let it come." So he did, and she listened. When the fever finally broke, Theodore awoke to sunlight and silence. Elena sat in the chair beside his bed, asleep, a book open in her lap. Her hair fell across her face. She looked exhausted. How many nights had she stayed up watching over him? He studied her in the morning light, the gentle curve of her cheek, the way her fingers still rested on the book's pages, as if she'd fallen asleep mid-sentence. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was good, genuinely, uncomplicatedly good, and she'd stayed. Not because he paid her, not because she wanted something from him, but because leaving him alone would have been cruel, and cruelty wasn't in her nature. Theodore felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it existed. Oh no, he thought. Oh God, no. He was falling in love with her. Stories like this take a lot of effort and resources to put together, and I'd love you to support my work by hitting the subscribe button and liking this video so it shows up to more people. Also, I am curious to know, what part of the world are you watching this video from? Leave your reply in the comment section. Let's connect. Now, let's go back into the story. Recovery was slow. Dr. Reeves insisted Theodore take a month away from work, a sentence that would have been unthinkable before. But now, with Elena managing the house and Victor handling the company's day-to-day operations, Theodore found himself resting, actually resting. He wandered the penthouse in comfortable clothes, Brunello Cucinelli cashmere instead of his usual armor of suits, feeling almost human. Reading books, watching rain, existing without agenda. And Elena was always nearby. Not hovering, she gave him space, respected his silences, but available, a constant, gentle presence. They fell into new routines. Morning coffee on the terrace, or Elena would tell him stories about Montepulciano, the festivals, the vineyards, her grandmother's recipe for peachy pasta that she swore was magic. Afternoon board games. Elena had found a chess set in his study and insisted he teach her. She was terrible at first, impulsive and emotional, where Theodore was calculated. But she learned fast, and soon their matches became genuine contests. "You're letting me win," she accused one day, moving her queen into obvious danger. "I'm not." "Liar." But she smiled. He captured her queen. "I don't believe in letting people win. Victory means nothing if it's given." Elena studied the board, then looked up at him with those clear green eyes. "What about mercy? Do you believe in that?" The question landed somewhere deep. "I'm learning to." Evening cooking became their most sacred time. Elena led him into her kitchen, the first person in years she'd allowed in her workspace. She taught him to make risotto, the constant stirring that couldn't be rushed, how to tell when pasta water was properly salted by taste alone, the difference between chopping and mincing. Theodore, who could negotiate billion-dollar deals, was humbled by a paring knife and fresh basil. "You're thinking too much," Elena said, watching him massacre tomatoes. "I'm being precise." "No, you're being afraid. Cooking isn't surgery. You can't hurt it." She moved beside him, her hand covering his on the knife. "Feel the rhythm. Let the blade do the work." Her touch was warm. Theodore could smell her shampoo, something simple, lavender maybe. This close, he could count the freckles on her nose. "Focus," he told himself. "You're cutting tomatoes. That's all this is." But it wasn't. Every moment with her was teaching him something new about himself, that he could be patient, that he could laugh, actually laugh, not the cold performance he'd perfected for cameras. That peace wasn't weakness, that he'd been alone for so long, he'd forgotten what connection felt like. One night, Elena found him on the terrace at midnight, unable to sleep. "Headache?" she asked, sitting beside him without invitation. "No, just thinking." "About?" "Everything. Nothing. How his life had been a desert and she'd somehow made it bloom. How the curse, if it even was a curse, had brought her here. How terrified he was of her leaving." "The old woman," he said instead. "The one in the rain. I think about her sometimes." "What old woman?" So he told her. The whole story. His cruelty, her words, the way his life had unraveled precisely as she'd predicted. Elena listened without interruption. When she finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you believe in curses?" she finally asked. "I don't know. I didn't, but now," he gestured at himself, at the ruins of his former certainty. "Maybe I was cursed, or maybe I just finally had to face what I'd become." "What had you become?" "Empty. Hollow." Exactly what she said. Elena turned to face him fully. "You're not hollow, Theodore." It was the first time she'd used his first name. It struck him like lightning. "You were hurt, and you built walls so high you forgot there was anything worth protecting inside them. But you're not hollow," Elena said. "I've seen you these past weeks. I've seen you trying." Trying and failing? Trying is enough. She reached out, squeezed his hand once, brief, warm, gone too fast. Theodore stared at where she'd touched him and wanted to tell her everything, that she'd saved him, that he loved her, that the thought of her leaving carved through him like knives. But he couldn't. She was engaged, spoken for, leaving in 6 weeks. So instead, he said, "Thank you for staying." "You're welcome." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Geneva sparkle like fallen stars, and Theodore memorized every second, knowing his time was running out. 3 weeks before Elena's departure, Theodore did something he'd never done. He asked her about him. "Tell me about your fiancé," Theodore said over breakfast. Elena looked up, surprised. "Why?" "I'm curious. You've told me about your mother, your town, your childhood, but never him. Is he a secret?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "His name is Luca. We grew up together. His family owns the vineyard next to my mother's house." "And you love him?" The pause was infinitesimal. Most people wouldn't have caught it, but Theodore had spent 30 years reading people's silences. "I care for him very much," Elena said carefully. "He's good, patient. He waited for me to pursue culinary school in Florence, waited when I took this job, never complained." "That's not what I asked." Elena set down her coffee. "Why does it matter, Theodore?" "Because I'm in love with you. Because I need to know if I'm alone in this. Because I'm terrified and desperate and more alive than I've been in 20 years because of you." "It doesn't," he lied. "Forget I asked." The nightmares started again that week, but they were different now. In them, Theodore stood in the rain, and the old woman wasn't cursing him. She was weeping, and when he tried to help her, to give her money, to apologize, his hands passed through her like smoke. "Too late. You've learned the wrong lesson." He woke gasping. Elena appeared in his doorway minutes later, as if she'd sensed his distress. "Bad dream?" she asked, sitting beside him without invitation. "Yeah." "Want to talk about it?" He did. God, he did. But how could he explain that he was terrified of losing something he'd never actually had? "The old woman in my dream," he said instead. "She said I learned the wrong lesson." "What do you think she meant?" "I don't know. I thought the lesson was about kindness, about not being cruel, but maybe it's something else." Elena was quiet, thoughtful. "Maybe the lesson is that love isn't transactional, that you can't buy it or earn it or deserve it. You can only receive it freely and give it the same way." Theodora looked at her in the darkness. You're very wise. I'm really not. I just cook food and read books. She stood to leave. Elena, she paused. Tell her, something inside him screamed. Tell her before it's too late. Sleep well, is what he said. She left. Theodore lay awake until dawn, hating himself. With 2 weeks remaining, Theodore made a decision. He contacted Dr. Reeves privately and asked about Elena's mother, the diagnosis, the treatment options, the cost. Then he made calls to hospitals in Florence, to specialists in Milan, to the best oncologist in Europe. Within a week, he'd arranged everything, the best care money could buy, all paid for anonymously through a trust that couldn't be traced back to him. Elena's mother would live, would be comfortable, would recover, and Elena would never know it was him. Victor questioned the expense when he found out. Theodore, this is over €1 million. I know what it costs. For someone who's just an employee, she's not just an employee. Theodore's voice was quiet, final. Process it. Make sure it's completely anonymous. Victor studied him for a long moment. You're in love with her. Theodore didn't answer. Does she know? No. And are you going to tell her? No. Why not? Because she's engaged, because she's leaving, because love isn't about what I want, it's about what's best for her. Victor was quiet. Then, when did you become wise? Too late, Theodore said. Always too late. The call came 3 days before Elena's departure. Theodore was in his study when he heard her scream. He ran, actually ran, and found her in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. What happened? His heart hammered. Had someone died? Was she hurt? Elena looked at him with wonder. My mother. Someone, I don't know who, they paid for everything. Her treatment, her recovery care, everything. The hospital just called. She's going to be okay. She's going to live. Relief and agony twisted through Theodore in equal measure. That's wonderful. I don't understand. Who would do this? Who even knows about her situation? Maybe someone at the agency, Theodore suggested. Maybe she has friends you don't know about. Elena shook her head, laughing through tears. This is a miracle, an actual miracle. She threw her arms around Theodore, hugging him with pure, unself-conscious joy. He held her carefully, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heart beat against his chest. This, he thought, I'd give everything for this single moment. But the moment ended. Elena pulled back, wiped her eyes, laughed again. I need to call Luca. Oh God, he'll be so relieved. We can get married sooner now. I don't have to wait and save. She rushed off, still talking, leaving Theodore alone in the kitchen. He'd just given her the world and lost her completely. Elena's last day arrived with cruel sunshine. She'd packed the night before, that same worn suitcase she'd arrived with, now accompanied by a few gifts from the staff. Theodore had wanted to give her something, but what did you give someone who'd saved your life without knowing it? They had breakfast together one final time. Elena had made his favorite, the simple roasted chicken, perfect as always. You'll remember to actually eat after I'm gone, she asked. I'll try. And sleep and be kind to the next cook. I won't hire another cook. Elena looked up. Theodore? I can't. He set down his fork, the food tasteless. No one will ever compare to you. Something shifted in her expression. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. He met her eyes. You changed everything, Elena. You know that, don't you? I just cooked food. You did so much more than that. He wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, tell her everything, but he'd made his choice. You reminded me what it means to be human. Elena's eyes were bright. You did that yourself. I just stayed. You stayed, he agreed. When you could have left, when you should have left, you stayed and you cared and you expected nothing in return. Do you know how rare that is? Theodore, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you're engaged, I know you're leaving. I just need you to know that you mattered, that these months mattered. A tear slipped down her cheek. They mattered to me too. They finished breakfast in silence, both aware this was goodbye. At the door, Elena turned to him one last time. Be happy, she said. Find someone who sees you the way I did. Not the money or the power, just you. I found her already, Theodore said quietly, but she belongs to someone else. Elena's breath caught. For one heartbeat, two, something passed between them. Recognition, possibility, choice. Then she kissed his cheek. Goodbye, Theodore. Goodbye, Elena. She walked out of his life, suitcase in hand, heading home to a good man who'd waited patiently and a mother who would live. Theodore stood in the doorway until her taxi disappeared from view. Then he went to his study, sat at his desk, and felt the absence of her like a missing limb. The months that followed were strange. Theodore's health improved. The headaches faded, then vanished entirely. His focus returned, sharp and clear as it had been years ago. Business rebounded. Ashford Holdings recovered its reputation. He was winning again. And he felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a vast, aching emptiness where Elena's presence had been. He hired a cook, an older man, professionally perfect, who made excellent food and never spoke beyond what was necessary. Exactly what Theodore used to want. Now it felt like eating in a tomb. Victor noticed, of course. You're miserable. I'm fine. You're profitable and miserable. There's a difference. Theodore couldn't argue. He threw himself into work with renewed intensity. Meetings in Dubai, acquisitions in Singapore, a new venture capital fund that had the industry buzzing. He wore his Brioni suits like armor, his Loro Piana overcoats like shields. His Bentley Continental GT carried him through Geneva's streets like a sleek bullet, insulated from the world. But at night, alone in his penthouse study, surrounded by all the trappings of success, the Damien Hirst sculpture in the corner, the first edition Hemingways on the shelves, the La Marca espresso machine that cost 10,000 francs, he felt nothing but absence. One evening, he stood on his terrace in a Zegna robe, holding a glass of Chateau Margaux 1996, watching the sunset paint Lake Geneva in shades of fire. This view, this wine, this moment, it should have meant something. It was just empty beauty. He set the wine down, untouched, and went inside. One day, his mother called. I heard you've recovered. Good. I need you in Zurich next week for the... No, Theodore said. Silence. His mother wasn't accustomed to being refused. Excuse me? I said no, Mother. I'm not coming. Theodore, we discussed this. You discussed it. I'm declining. I have other priorities. What priorities could possibly be more important than my own happiness, Theodore said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. My own life. I'm done living according to your expectations. Another long silence. Then, unexpectedly, it's about a woman, isn't it? Yes. Did she leave you? I let her go. My mother laughed, brittle and sad. Then you're a fool, Theodore. Love doesn't come around often, especially not for people like us. People like us? People who've forgotten how. Her voice softened, just slightly. If you love her, fight for her. She's engaged. So was I once, to someone safe and boring. Then I met your father. A pause. I've made a lot of mistakes with you, Theodore, but letting your father go would have been the worst. Don't make the same mistake. She hung up. Theodore sat with those words for a long time. 6 months after Elena left, Theodore received a letter. It arrived in his office, forwarded through 3 different addresses, Elena's handwriting unmistakable. His hands shook as he opened it. Theodore, I'm writing this from Montepulciano, where everything she'd be perfect. My mother as well. The treatment worked. She's stronger every day. Luca and I are planning the wedding. The vineyard is beautiful this time of year. I should be happy, but I can't stop thinking about a penthouse in Geneva, about early morning cooking lessons and board games, and someone who finally learned to laugh. I made a choice when I left. I chose duty over uncertainty. I chose the good man who waited over the broken man who was learning to be whole. But Theodore, I think I chose wrong. Luca loves me, but he loves the girl I was before I left. He doesn't ask about my time in Geneva. He doesn't want to hear about you, and I need to talk about you. I need to tell someone how you fought through darkness and came out the other side, how you learned gentleness, how you saved my mother without asking for anything in return. Yes, I know it was you. Luca didn't have that kind of money. The agency didn't care that much. Only one person would have done something that generous and that secret. Only you. I'm not asking for anything. You deserve to know that you mattered, that these months mattered. I hope you're well. I hope you're eating properly. I hope you're happy. Always, Elena. Theodore read the letter 3 times. Then he walked to his closet, pulled out a simple overnight bag, Valextra leather, understated elegance, and began to pack. He paused at his watch collection, the Patek Philippe, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, the vintage Rolex Daytona. He'd worn these watches to signal success, to intimidate, to armor himself in wealth. He chose none of them. Instead, he reached for a simple stainless steel piece his father had given him before he died, the only thing Theodore owned that meant something beyond its price tag. He booked a flight to Florence. Montepulciano was exactly as Elena had described. Winding streets, terracotta roofs, vineyards rolling into forever. Theodore stood outside her mother's house in his simplest clothes. Dark jeans, a plain white shirt, no logos, no armor, his heart attempting escape velocity. A woman answered the door. Older, thin but healthy, with Elena's eyes. "You're Mrs. Rossi?" "You're Theodore." Not a question. She smiled. "She talks about you constantly, drives poor Luca mad." "Is she here?" "In the vineyard. I'll show you." She led him through the house and out to terraced slopes heavy with grapes, and there, among the vines, was Elena. She wore simple clothes, dirt on her hands, sunlight in her hair. She was picking grapes and singing softly to herself. She was the most beautiful thing Theodore had ever seen. "Elena." She turned, froze. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. Then, "You came." "I got your letter. I thought I wasn't sure if you would." She wiped her hands on her jeans, nervous in a way he'd never seen her. "Why did you come?" "Because you're right. You chose wrong." He stepped closer, every word feeling like the most important thing he'd ever said. "But so did I. I let you go because I thought love meant sacrifice, meant putting you first, no matter what. But that's not love. That's cowardice." "Elena." "I love you," he said. "I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see the world. I love that you stayed when you could have left. I love that you taught me to be human again." Elena's eyes shimmered. "I'm engaged." "I know." "I'm supposed to marry Luca in 3 weeks." "I know." "He's a good man." "I know that too." Theodore stopped an arm's length away, close enough to touch, but keeping his distance. "I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm just asking you to choose honestly, whatever that means, whoever that means." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, half sob, half joy. "You're terrible at timing, you know that?" "The worst. I broke off the engagement yesterday." Theodore's world stopped. "What?" "I couldn't do it. Couldn't stand at the altar with him and think about you. It wasn't fair, to him or me." She stepped closer. I told him I needed to figure out who I am now, what I want, and he understood, because he is good, too good to be someone's second choice. And what do you want? Elena reached up, cupped his face in her hands, those capable, gentle hands that had fed him and healed him and taught him what care looked like. I want the man who learned to love when love was the hardest thing in the world. I want late nights and early mornings and someone who actually sees me. She smiled through tears. I want you, Theodore, if you'll have me. He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of everything he'd kept locked inside for months. She kissed him back, and it tasted like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Elena laughed. What? Theodore asked. The old woman, her curse. What about it? Love freely given is the only thing that matters. You finally learned. Theodore pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. We both did. And in the distance, if you believed in such things, you might have heard the sound of a curse breaking, not with thunder or drama, but with the quiet certainty of two people choosing each other despite everything, choosing love, finally. Theodore sold the Geneva penthouse. Too many ghosts, he told himself. Too much coldness. He kept the company, reformed and restructured, with Victor promoted to co-CEO, and a new directive, people before profit. It caused waves. It lost him some investors. He didn't care. He and Elena split their time between a smaller apartment overlooking Lake Geneva and her family's vineyard in Montepulciano. She taught him to make wine. He taught her chess strategies she still ignored in favor of impulse. They argued sometimes about money, about his workaholic tendencies, about her need to take in every stray person who needed help. But they never stopped talking, never stopped seeing each other. On their anniversary, Theodore took her to Geneva's old town, to the exact spot where his car had stopped in the rain. Why are we here? Elena asked. I never thanked her. The old woman? Theodore, she cursed you. She saved me. He looked at the place where his life had ended and begun. Everything I have now, it started here, with her curse and my cruelty, and the long road back. Elena laced her fingers through his. Do you think she's real, or was it just coincidence? Does it matter? No, Elena said, smiling. I suppose it doesn't. They stood together in the place where Theodore had once refused mercy and received judgment, where he'd been hollow and cruel and lost. And now, with Elena beside him, he was found. Not perfect, not unbroken, but learning every day what it meant to love freely and be loved the same way. The rain began to fall, soft and gentle, like a blessing. Theodore didn't run from it this time. He simply stood with the woman he loved and let it wash everything clean.